Good evening, everyone. I'm Hannah Payne from Jon Jones. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Arts Building this evening, our headquarters for the presentation and protection of art for this event with Tru Vue, Innovations in Framing and Sealed Packages. We've been in our new state-of-the-art building for a year now. I hope you enjoyed your tours of the Jon Jones Conservation Studio. You'll be hearing more about our work in museum standard framing from our chairman, Matthew Jones, and from Craig Horsfall, Head of Conservation here at Jon Jones, speaking on the panel. Before I hand over to our esteemed panel, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Tru Vue, pioneers in museum glazing, who've travelled from their headquarters in the US to hold this event at Jon Jones tonight. A special thank you in particular to Dr. Jennifer Booth of Tru Vue, who is chairing the talk, and to Hugh Phibbs and Stuart Welch, who we are honoured to have speaking on the panel this evening. To make you aware, this event is being filmed on a live webcast, and the videos will be available to share after the event. There'll be an opportunity for Q&As at the end of this talk, and you'll be able to share your views tonight on social media. We have a hashtag on screen behind me. We will be serving more drinks and canapes at the end of the evening, so do stay on and network and enjoy the event. And I'll now hand over to the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Hannah for the introduction, and also to Jon Jones for not only being our host this evening, but for being so enthusiastic when I approached them with the idea about this evening a few months ago and jumping on board. I'm really pleased that we're actually hosting this event at Jon Jones, because I feel there's quite a good synergy between our two companies and our outlooks, in that we're both really interested in the education of the people in the industries that we work with. And this evening is about the promotion of education. We hope you're going to learn some very good things, but it's also a chance for you to meet other people that are working in your industry, and rather than being targeted directly towards one thing or the other, there's going to be a whole mix of people here. So we have conservators, we have framers, we have collectors and art advisors. So it's a brilliant opportunity to mingle. And we've got three wonderful talks with four great speakers. The first one's going to be by Hugh. He's actually going to be demonstrating a sealed package, and if you have a look in the bags that are on the back of your chairs, there's actually going to be a little box inside with the materials that he will be using. So when you get home, you can have a little go and see if you can create what Hugh is going to show you.
Yeah. Anyone can do it.
Over to you, Hugh.
Thank you very much. I am profoundly grateful to Tru Vue and to Jon Jones for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. As you see, what I've titled my portion of the talk is Reconsideration, because having spent 35 years working at our National Gallery, a copy of yours, when I was there, basically, while things were in frames, everyone felt they were in use rather than happily sitting in the dark in the storage. What I have become more and more aware of is that if something is in a proper enclosure, whether it's in the frame or in the drawer, it can be protected from oxidation. And what I want to share with you is my new view that oxidation is the main cause of harm to works of art on paper and most other works of art, except for oil paintings, which require oxidation. It's necessary to their curing. But in that wise, what I want to say is, and what I want to share with you tonight, and I was here last year with a wonderful group, and to whom I apologize because I didn't have all the facts in place, and today we're going to do better. So I'm glad to say Tru Vue are, and I'm sure Jon Jones also, are constant practitioners of the Japanese art of Kaizen, which means continuous improvement. So next, please. So preservation is minimal oxidation, and the enclosure is one way to arrive at that. Next, please. if we look at what things look like without oxidation, how long does cellulose last? How long does protein last? Well, we see here threads of blue-green algae that are 250 million years old. Cellulose is not autodestructive by itself. It will last in salt for 250 million years. So we know that these materials are very robust if they are kept out of harm's way. The dinosaur flesh there looks still red, and I hear now they're actually claiming to get blood cells out of some of these samples, not these particular ones. But so if you enclose things, they last, and that's what I hope to share with you. Next, please. We've seen through history people doing wonderful examples. Our ancestors weren't idiots. They really had good ideas. And today I saw a Roman coffin from London here, and I think lead coffins are a great idea, although, you know, I don't necessarily want one. My mother used to can her jelly using paraffin. Wax is a wonderful preservation medium. The Fayum coffin portraits last for thousands of years and look very fresh. And the daguerreotype of Poe there, we can see worked partially. There is clearly some oxidation going on around poor Edgar. But I want to share with you my enthusiasm for polyethylene terephthalate, read that Mylar or Melanex. If we could have the next slide, please. Because it is essential to what I'm going to call a sustainable enclosure. If you're going to enclose something, you have to be able to monitor its upkeep and its condition. And that means you have to be able to see into it. So you need something there that is a good barrier to oxidation. Next, please. So what I'm advocating is what I'm calling not anoxic enclosures, which are really wonderful if you can afford them, but they're horrendously expensive and hard to manage. But hypoxic enclosures, things that just slow down the oxidation. So how do we create these things? Well, if we try to substitute gases, that's what they do with anoxia, and it's ruinously expensive and difficult. Using oxygen absorbers like ageless, again, it's very hard and it's very hard to manage. But if one thing I have found just in my own domestic testing around the house or in the garden is that as you make things drier, you get less oxidation, including photooxidation, so less fading. So as dry as we are comfortable with them going, that's a really safe way to think about how we're going to keep things going. If something is properly enclosed, it will become more hypoxic as it goes down the road because the elements inside are going to use up the oxidizing gases. But we don't know how long that's going to take, and dehydration is a safer short-term example. Next, please. So what it means is when we have made something relatively dry with no chance of getting more air in there, we have the least solvent. And I am referring here to water, the universal solvent. Not everyone likes for me to be so anti-water, but it always bothers me. And we also have very little expense, and with a proper package, it will not flex. That's very important because as we dry things out, we do not want to be flexing them. Next, please. So what we're going to look at here are the components, and can you guys hear me without this? Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much. Because you have in your package different components that I will be using to create an enclosure for you. And one of them is a sealing foil. This happens to be something that I was preparing. Okay, there we go.
I think I just have to hold this for you for the video.
Sorry, yeah, okay. So this is a sealing foil that is used to make party balloons, okay? It's available from homedepot.com, and I just discovered it on the web because I am a tireless searcher for materials like this. And what I have done is I've prepared it with a very sticky carrierless adhesive called 3M969. It's an ATG. And I've also prepared a piece of Optium very carefully so I don't touch the surface using the paper there. And I put a strip of the same adhesive around the edges. And now I'm going to fold it over the front with my nail. again, without touching the edges. We will see if I will be successful. And so you get to do your own in the privacy of your own home. So we don't get to watch you struggle. But I'm here to do that. Okay, so now then we have our work of art, which is a piece of board here, which also comprises the reservoir, because this holds the moisture load for the piece. And now I've got to set this down on the edge of Stuart's wonderful frame here and pull off. And I'm sorry I can't do this in the vertical, or you would watch everything fall down. Okay, so pull off the, and one more time. Okay, I'm just going to realign it, because it's sticking to itself, which is, this is, never do a demonstration in public unless you were crazy. Okay, so trying to get proper alignment in midair, and we're going down here, and we go over here and over here. This allows me, I will have some folds in it because I was aligning it without it being on a table, but I simply pull it up around the edges this way and pinch it shut at the corners. And once I've pushed it hard onto the edge, because the adhesive was on the edge of the thing, it's actually sealed, I push it onto the front and form it more completely, just to give it extra protection. But by the time we've done this, we have an hypoxic enclosure. And I can push on the back, and it's leaking a little, and that's how we test it, is to push on them to see. But I'll pass this around, and then I'll take this back. Thank you. So people can see what the results are. Next, please. So one of the things that's important to know is that different polymers have different degrees of the ability to stop oxygen, O2, and water, H2O. And I'm not going to ask you to try to read down all of this bizarre stuff, but all of these complicated chemical names, but only to know that polyethylene terephthalate, which is Melanex or Mylar, has very good numbers. I got to get out of the way here. For both oxygen and water, whereas the third from the bottom, which is plexiglass, PMMA, has a good oxygen number and a very high water number. So you expect moisture to go through acrylic, whereas it does not go through Mylar. Next, please. The other important thing to know is that anything that has an anti-reflective coating will have a porous surface. It doesn't matter whether it's glass or acrylic, and that porous surface will make bonding things to that surface difficult. So we always bond our sealing foil to the side of the package as well as to the front. Next, please. This just shows you different versions of sealing foils, the ones that were traditionally used, Marvel Seal and Mitsubishi and the others. This is the balloon material. This is a balloon from celebrating my daughter's graduate school graduation that will probably be still floating around the top of my ceiling when I get home, and that will be 5 weeks on. So if this stuff holds helium, which is smaller than hydrogen, which is diatomic, then you know it's a really good barrier. Next, please. So this is, we're using this kind of adhesive, which is used for short-term packages, but you could use a hot glue for long-term packages. And I'm going to explain what that looks like. And I have some samples if people are interested that I could show them afterwards. Next, please. These are, what I can tell you from testing these packages is that if you make everything in the package utterly dry and watch it equilibrate to 50% or museum normal, it will take 6 months. If you add silica gel, it will take 18 months. We've done this over and over and over again, but we know that it's equilibrating through the acrylic in front. If you made a glass package and sealed it properly, it would not respond to the environment at all. Next, please. These are tests that I did in the garden, and please ignore these on this side because it's slightly weird, but as you see, as the packages get bluer and bluer and drier, the fading pinks at the top tend to get more strong. So this is what tells me dry is good when we're worried about delicate colors fading. Next, please. This is a technique that I have found to be very useful for handling this horribly difficult to handle hot melt glue. You simply take your glue gun and make a little V-shaped notch at the bottom of it, which allows it to pass evenly along the side and make very even lines of glue, both on the front and the side. And then you can, anyone, again, can make, with any hot iron, can make a simple package very quickly. Next, please. Here's the package being bonded with heat and then trimmed at the bottom and the finished form. And I have one of those if anyone needs to see it later. Next, please. This is the process that you watched me struggle through up here as we used to do it with one of my colleagues who is a hand model doing it for us. Here, the next, please. Here's, again, package testing as I was starting to press on mine. Hers is clearly sticking better than mine because it's not deflating when she pushes down on it. Next, please. The beauty of enclosure is best seen for me here, because this painting by Hans Memling was the star of a diptych show that happened at the National Gallery. And it was a political hotcake because it belonged to Bruges, and Brussels wanted lint, and Bruges wanted it enclosed. But they also wanted it to be open to 27 degrees. So what we knew we wanted to use was Optium, because of its wonderful anti-reflective properties, but we had to figure out how to bend it to 27 degrees. And my brilliant colleague, Steve Wilcox, was able to take it to a saw and cut it with little V notches on either side, which allowed me to bend it to 27 degrees and finish the package, so that you see the landscape here actually congruent, whereas up in the, if it were flat, it wouldn't read. So it's one of the most brilliant paintings I've ever seen, because it shows that even in the age of Memling, they were thinking in these three-dimensional, amazing ways. So finally, I would just like to share with you, next please, that I think we have various forms of packaging, all of which can serve for different parts of the collection. Paintings require packages, especially panel paintings, with laminated glass, which load from the back. Matted items can go in packages such as I made. And if you were actually using posters or textile where you wanted to put for instance, acrylic is very soft and can safely go on the surface of some works, then you could make a kind of an envelope package or something closer to what Stuart's going to show you in his papyrus package. All of this can be done, and with very little added expense and very little expertise. So that's what I'm happy to share that I wasn't quite as well able to articulate when I was here last year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to Hugh. And now we're going to have Matthew Jones, Chairman of Jon Jones, and Craig Horsfall, Head of Conservation at Jon Jones.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So, the first slide. So here we are at the beginning. That's actually my dad on the right. So the company, I'm going to talk through a little bit the journey that we've been on. So this is 1960s, day one. If we go to the next slide. And I think really when I joined, I've been in the company, I celebrate 30 years next year. And when I started, our focus really was about the protection of art, the presentation of art. So it was all about building the right design, and there he is again in action with Paul Arago designing a show in the 1980s. So very much a focus on presentation. If you go to the next slide. For me, we went through a very significant change in 2003. And I just want to sort of talk through that. And really started when we took on an amazing member of the team who joined us from a company in America. And interesting when you bring in outside expertise into a way in which we're working every day. We soon looked at what we were doing, how we were doing, and decided that we were going to actually go through a journey of revisiting all of our standards. and pretty much a start again exercise. And it was interesting because I actually thought it'd be something we could achieve in about 3 months. That's kind of, I put a timeline on that, but it actually took us about a year. So the journey we went on, first of all, was very much about opening up conversations with conservators in this country, suppliers, and then took the journey to America to gather more information. And we met up with very good friends and close contacts with Jed Bark, who I know you did a talk with 3 years ago. So with Jed, we looked at the standards that he was working to and really realized at that time we were probably about 5 years behind what was going on in America. We went through an exercise of sending out, actually, I'll talk about a bit of a disaster first of all. We framed a series of 3 Picasso etchings in '98, and at that time, when we framed them, everything, I felt we were working very much to conservation standards, to acid-free, using acid-free materials. These pristine, amazing etchings that came in. In 2003, the British Museum fed through some information to the collector that the works that were produced by Picasso in the 1950s on arch paper had to be in contact with unbuffered boards. So the client bought the works in, and there I was thinking, we've done everything absolutely right, the right materials. They came in, they looked absolutely amazing from the outside. When we opened up the frames and took the mounts away, you could see a very, very strong yellow where the mount had actually been. So we went for a very difficult situation. The client freaked out. We were shocked, but in a way had to sort of calm the situation down, and the best way to do that was to bring a conservator in and talk through what had happened. And pleasing that we were basically supported in that what we had done in '98 was pretty much the best we could do with the information, the knowledge, the materials that were available. I'm pleased to say that the works were restored. We shared the costs of the restoration of the works, but it met with what we were doing at this very, very convenient time around 2003, where we were actually able to say to the collector, this is now what we do, this is now the materials we're using, museum standard framing. The works were reframed, and I think the collector then went through a real learning exercise in appreciating what we'd done, and then went through really a negative to positive, where he then had the rest of his collection re-examined, re-looked at, reframed to our new standards. So when we got to 2003 was very much a journey into 2004. A questionnaire was sent out where we got more information to gather our standards. And at 2004, the standards were released to us internally. At the same time, around the 2005, the British Museum had this amazing 3-day seminar. Probably a few of you probably went to that seminar. It was really amazing for us because it really did link in everybody in the conservation world to work together, and it really stamped really our decision on where we were going with our framing standards. During the journey, one of the longest bits that took us time was the spacer fillet that keeps the glazing away from the surface of the work. At the time, we were using a paper-wrapped wood fillet, and we discovered and then made a paper-covered perspex fillet, which is now something we use in our frames. So that was a patent product that came through in 2004. And I think really up to today now, from 2005 to 2011, these are the standards that we've been working towards. In 2011, we brought in our own in-house conservation department. this is where we were then able, with our conservation team, to look at our day-to-day practices, to continue research and development with how we're working, and start offering this in-house conservation process where every work now that comes in follows a procedure with condition reports and eventual treatment. The room was tiny. We ran out of space quite quickly, but we knew that our journey was moving into this amazing building where I think most of you have seen now on our second floor, we have this amazing space that's now set up. So pretty much where we are now in this new building, I'd just like to talk about the functions and how this actually works. Where you're sitting now, this is our showroom. Very much a focus now that we hide all of our corner samples away so that when the works do come in, they're on a flat surface. We're able to actually examine the works, learn about the works, produce necessary reports for the works, look at the best way to present, what boards to use, what hinging materials to actually use. So it's all about now the protection elements of what goes on inside the frame. Then we bring the framing solutions to the work with the many options that there actually are. And then our final conversation is with glazing. And I have to say, throughout the journey that we've been on over the last few years, a lot of our time is spent on talking about the different glazing options that you have. If you have a look at the walls that we've set up, the works that are actually up, there's a variety of different glazing products. We've actually listed down the ones that are glazed with the Tru Vue Optium. But we're looking at things in very much 5 ways with the glazing. We've got UV filter, low reflective, safety, weight, and cost, which all comes into that as a consideration. So, and then hanging the works in the worst possible way, which is directly in front of windows. But it really gives us that clarity of being able to show how each of the glazing products perform. So I'm going to, a little bit of the journey, hand over to our technical genius here with Craig, who's going to talk through some case studies with conservation.
Hello, good evening. I'm delighted to be part of this event tonight, discussing framing and sealed enclosures. I'm picking up on Matt's comments about collaborations. It's an honour to have the opportunity to share some examples of case studies with you tonight. I'll talk tonight about my experience of using sealed enclosure framing, telling you about the results of simple testing, considerations about whether their use is suitable, where I learned about this technique, and examples of framing projects that have made use of these enclosures. Here at Jon Jones, we make use of highly sealed enclosures to minimize air exchange in and out of the frame microclimates by using barrier materials, but without trying to establish lower oxygen levels. To demonstrate the added protection that even simple sealing can provide, we have made test packages using glass front and back, aluminium tape seals, and containing a hygrometer or data logger to enable monitoring. A package containing Tycor as hygroscopic buffering material was stored at 100% relative humidity, and the internal relative humidity was observed to go up by only 5% over 3 months. A sealed package containing only a data logger but no buffering material at all was stored at 100% relative humidity, and the internal relative humidity was observed to go up by 20% over 3 weeks, but with no buffering material in there at all. Even a slight ingress of moisture would, be very apparent in this small enclosure. In comparison, a control package sealed with only several layers of paper tape reached 100% relative humidity in less than 3 days in the same environment. These results help demonstrate how sealed enclosures provide better protection for an artwork than only partial use of barrier materials, and how the addition of buffering material can help provide protection if extreme conditions persist. In terms of the considerations we apply, as providers of framing and conservation services, Jon Jones can inquire about display conditions and make recommendations, but it is the clients and owners who are the final decision makers in regards to acquisitions and display. So what are our considerations in using sealed enclosures? Has the display environment been identified as posing a high level of risk? Or is the artwork particularly vulnerable to standard display conditions? If the answer to either of these is yes, then sealed enclosure framing may be considered. Can sources of off-gassing into the frame microclimate be excluded? If yes, then sealed enclosure framing is recommended. If no, then the period of display and the level of risk posed by display are considered, and sealed enclosures may still be recommended if accompanied by appropriately high levels of management, as the following case studies will discuss. What specifications do the materials selected need to meet? Glass is the better barrier material, while acrylic options are lighter but can absorb small amounts of moisture which can permeate through. Hygroscopic buffing materials such as acid-free board and ArtSorb are essential. We consider what monitoring devices might be appropriate to include within the enclosure, and how can these be assessed and accessed. And also, what kind of scavenging materials should be included within the enclosure, such as micro-chamber board or activated carbon cloth. The first project I worked on using such highly sealed enclosures was with Museum Conservation Services of Cambridge, soon after graduating. They were selected in this case to protect a collection of vintage photographs during temporary display by isolating them from exposure to high levels of volatile organic compounds in a newly built display environment. The first opportunity to use a similar solution at Jon Jones came when we were contacted to assess a collection ahead of its relocation to Singapore. We discussed the future display conditions with the client and agreed that they presented a moderate level of risk because periods of high humidity could be expected despite air conditioning, in addition to the fluctuations associated with air freight transit. The materials selected for use were glazing of laminated glass for smaller artworks and Optium Museum acrylic for larger artworks, aluminium foil seals, microchamber board, very generous quantities of ArtSorb included within the frame microclimate to slow any upward drift in relative humidity, humidity indicated cards that could be read from outside the frame enclosure, and acrylic backboards to enable these cards to be viewed. Instructions were given on the client on how to monitor conditions within the frames, and contact details were provided for local conservators who could help with monitoring and then renewal of materials. Also, enough space was included within the frame design to allow for the expansion of the acrylics during more humid conditions, because there's lateral expansion as moisture permeates into the acrylic. As a second example, we've been asked to display frame artworks that were going for display on boats. These present a higher risk environment, inevitably, because even with air conditioning, these high humidity and high salt conditions are far, far from ideal museum conditions. Nevertheless, there are many precedents for artworks being displayed and even commissioned for such situations. When a photograph on an original wood-pulp board was brought in to us for framing, having been specifically bought for display on this boat, we offered sealed enclosure framing as a way of limiting the effect the display environment would have on the sensitive artwork, despite the risk that off-gassing from the board would build up within the frame. Alongside framing, we highlighted the risks posed by display and recommended very close monitoring of the condition of the artwork and regular renewal of the microchamber board used inside within the frame. Although the artwork was going into a display environment to which it was poorly suited, the framing approach has to some extent mitigated this, and the project has been used as an opportunity to enter into discussions with the client about preventive conservation and teaching them about the way that materials react over time, what is stable and what isn't. And for a third example, and a final example here of sealed enclosure framing, turns this concept on its head somewhat by being about protecting the human environment rather than the artwork. Asked to frame a pair of 40-year-old artworks by Dieter Roth, one incorporating salami and the other cheese, it was impossible to ignore the strong smell coming from the cheese. For the cheese artwork, we framed it in a sealed enclosure to minimize air exchange with the outside, and with the added protection of activated carbon cloth included within the frame package to cut down on the level of organic material. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to both Craig and Matt there. And now I'm going to pass over to Stuart Welch, founder of Conservation by Design.
Thank you. I'm afraid I don't have any fancy photographs, so you just have to do it with my smiling face. But I brought some examples of what I was going to talk about today, which is an item that we've called enigma frame. And this is a solution was developed for the Thesaurus Islamicus Foundation in Cairo in response to an inquiry that we had, that they had to help the Cairo Museum to store their papyrus collection. It was an interesting inquiry to get. We got it from John Mumford, Cheryl Porter, and Anna Benny, who was the lead conservator working on the project. And I'd had something in mind for a long time, which might be useful for papyrus, but it couldn't be used in the sense because it was using standard acrylic. And this was an idea that I pinched, so it's not an original idea. I've just adapted this to fit in with our Planorama storage range, which is aluminium furniture. And the Planorama, there's some brochures in your bags which shows these aluminium drawers system. It's very light. We make drawers down to 10 millimeter in depth, in height. And for this project, we used a 20 millimeter drawer, which is this one here. The concept, I'm going to hold this up. I don't know, can you hear me without the mic? Yes, I know about molding into my beard. This is an example of one of our 20 millimeter Planorama drawers with an enigma frame set into plastozote sheeting to locate it in the drawer. The actual project, the drawers were much bigger, and there'd be several pieces in the drawer, and they were to be either A1, A3, or A4 in size, depending on the papyrus size, and to be located within the drawers. There were quite a lot of drawers. It was a very big project, and it also included workshop furniture and desks and a whole lot of things was going to be delivered for this project. But unfortunately, the revolution in Egypt got in the way, and the project is sitting, waiting to develop. So within that drawer, we sat this little frame, which in this case it's single-sided, and I just made an item there. There was papyrus here, but it was confiscated by the officials at the Cairo Museum because they thought it was coming out of their collection. So we did a deal where they kept the papyrus and they could put it in their collection. And it was the worst tourist papyrus you could imagine. So they've got a piece of junk in there. But we managed to we got our frame back out. And the idea was that it's a double-sided item, but they would be cut there, and the papyrus would be floated inside the enclosure. The frame itself could contain a gasket which would hold the two sheets tight and make a very good sealed enclosure, but it was thought by Anna that she wanted a bit more airflow, so we included were two sheets of 550 micron museum board, and between those there would be a sandwich of either corrosion intercept or activated charcoal cloth, or maybe even the paint that we do a carbon paint on the board, which acted like a little gasket inside the frame and purified the air inside, because the air in Cairo is awful. The pollution levels were dreadful, and the windows were all broken, sort of bits, so the air circulation was horrible. But I'll pass this around. And then you can see what we call this enigma frame, in the sense of you can see how easy it is to get into it. You'll see there are no fixings on the frame, and so it's just to make the thing difficult for people to get in without knowing how to do it. So the shrinkage or stealing of pieces by collectors was made that much more difficult. But the thing that the Optium Tru Vue gave us was the anti-static, because previous to that, the static had always been an issue with papyrus, that it would be attracted to the surface of an acrylic. And so that gave us the chance to work on the frame, because we have to machine it. And I'll now show you the secret of how it's done. This was the... Okay, sorry. This was the original frame that I saw back in the late 1970s. And I thought, this looks great, there must be a use for it. But its conservation uses weren't too clever. It was called the Andy Warhol click frame or whatever at the time. And I'd kept it knocking around until we got this request about, did we have any ideas for storing papyrus? And I thought, yes, I've got something. And now we've got the Tru Vue, maybe we could do something with it. So that was the beginning of it for with Anna to develop frames and storage drawers to house the papyrus without using the traditional method of passepartout and without issues of static, but being able to put inside the frame scavengers and things to keep the air within the frame pure, so that any gases that might be coming off of the papyrus could be gathered by the museum board as a humidity buffer, and by the active carbons or the corrosion intercept sandwiched in between. So this one has been nicely worn, so it's easy for me to show you how the system works. So if you're looking there, anybody figured it out yet? How to get in there? No? You can't pull them off. Yeah. You can try. Yeah. So originally I just called it enigma because that made it that bit difficult. But basically, it works on tolerance. Yeah? So a thin aluminium profile can slide and keep the two pieces of acrylic together. Yeah? So it requires quite precise machining. The sample that we have there was machined on a CNC, so it's not extruded, so it will be extruded. And we need to do some adjustments on the acrylic. But basically, by very fine adjustments, on the tolerance of just the cut on the corner, it's enough by a little bit of movement, sliding it always in the same direction, you can find that you can actually open the two pieces together. But it's not something you can do very quickly. So it's not the easiest access to the frame, but it does give you an option then to fit in either a sealed package or a gasket between the mount board to hold the frame together. Okay, what we did with this version that's different to this is flush with the acrylic, so it looks very smart, very sexy in its way. But we wanted to have the profile slightly above the acrylic on both sides, so that if it's laid on a table or for viewing, then it's not going to get scratched too easily on the surface. And then the whole things were designed to sit within the nest, the plastizote nest within the drawer, and then the drawers inside lovely cabinets, and then safely stored. And it was meant to be a very special project funded by TIMA, or the Islamic Manuscript Foundation, which is based in Saudi Arabia. But as I say, the thing didn't happen. We did lots of other work there with vacuum packing and with anoxic enclosures and different things, but this particular project has been resting. The intention is that we will make this available as a frame anyway, because I think it'd be a useful item for people to have in conservation. I'll pass this one around as well, so this can go around and you can see it getting into it. I could, if I've got time, I can show you another frame which was more to do with anoxia, but I'll just wave that one around and it'll be here for you to look at afterwards, which is a frame that we're calling NOOX, which is to do with oxygen free. So the first profile we have here is with a little cutout window which shows an oxygen scavenger through the mat board on the top. And the profile is designed to take veneers set into the surface. It's a very heavy solution, and it's a two-part profile. So it works by a system of linear threads, which you can screw the bottom profile to the top profile, and that compresses on the gasket, and the item then, we've got things in progress. This is in development at the moment with expansion diaphragms and things at the back to allow for heat expansion and movement within the frame, and also to put scavengers in there to remove the oxygen and the moisture if necessary. So it's a much more complicated thing to produce, to make a frame which is fundamentally simple to make and can be done easily by an individual with the right kit of things to make it oxygen free. And so I got obsessed by that by working on vacuum packing and different types of observations of removing oxygen in Escal packages or different things like that, and it just led on to the idea if we could make a frame that would be easy to use. So that is that. I can pass that around as well. Somewhat of a different weight. Following on from that, we made a deeper profile. So again, it's a two-part profile. You can hardly see it, but there's a line at the back where this screws into a linear thread that runs through the frame. I have some photographs open. And this one we made an item recently for Bertrand Laverdrine in Paris to present to St. Petersburg, where they have some very early daguerreotypes. And he wanted to make a frame which could be moisture controlled, not oxygen free, but moisture controlled, and use Tru Vue acrylic as the glazing on both sides. So it was available to see from both sides. And we floated inside the original, or it was meant to be. We made a mock-up, frame within a frame. So we had a frame sitting inside this frame, which was suspended by acrylic, by Tru Vue again. I made it in small pieces, but it would be machined out and be holding the frame in suspension. So the whole frame, which was three daguerreotypes, which were very early ones, some of the first, which he presented to the Tsar, would be suspended within this frame, and we built in packages with silica gel, active carbon, to act as moisture buffers. And so this is an ongoing thing which is fascinating to me. Probably not very profitable, but it's interesting to do, and Conservation by Design have supported me in the development and production, and it's been fitted in with other things that we could do. You can see it's an unusual profile. I don't think there's one around like it, because we have joining plates on the front as well as the back. And on the back we have two plates to join because of the size of the frame. But the pressures when you close up are enormous, and we didn't want the front of the frame to open. And it's available to fit in as I say, veneers to make it look slightly different and get colored or patinated or copper plated, whatever we might want to do. Or put a wooden frame around it. So that's the other option, is to, outside this package, is to put a decorative or a more conventional wood frame around it. So I think I've dried up. So we'll pass this one over.
Hello, I'm Valeria from Date. This is a question that I would ask regarding the frame that you just show for the Enigma frame. Is there any concerns about the papyri being in contact with the Optium? Is that because I couldn't see a lot of gap? Would you have any ideas on that, or is it something that you've reflected on?
Well, yes, Anna, the conservator, didn't want to have the papyrus constrained by any kind of tapes and things, but was happy for it to float within the shallow space of the mount. And I'm not going to argue with her on that if that's what she wanted. But it was simply floating, but not with pressurized contact, but loose, that it could, contact with the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what I've seen in the past, most papyrus are actually squashed onto the surface, and you get kind of either from the material itself an off-gassing of oils, or you think it's also from the glass deterioration could be causing issues as well. So,
yeah, I wonder, because this is a it's like a processed acrylic. It has filters, it has films, it has a lot of things that we don't know how they're gonna evolve. And then when they're in contact with the work, they might, I don't know. I don't know if maybe Hugh Phibbs will be able to talk about that as well. I don't know if there's anything that you've experienced before. So I just wonder, because we do get, alarmed if the work is in contact with the glazing, even if it's anti-static, even if it's, safe and glass. So I just...
Okay, so
Thank you.
well, I can give the Tru Vue response to that, and then I don't know if Hugh has anything he would like to add. So as far as the Optium itself is concerned, we do a lot of testing. We do both artificial aging and we do ODI testing, and we have it tested in several places. So as far as we can see, the Optium doesn't change over time. We have artificially aged it for 100 years. And obviously this is not a 100-year guarantee. It's in perfect conditions, but we've seen no change over 100 years to either the substrate or to the films that are on it. The films themselves are bonded both physically and chemically to the substrate, so they act as one. And off-gassing wise, it has passed the ODI test for permanent display.
Yeah.
And the PAT tests, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add?
The one thing that I've observed working in a museum is that ordinary acrylic is phenomenally soft. And I've seen paintings scratch it, I've seen collages scratch it, I've seen photographs scratch it. But to make the Optium, it is given a more robust surface, a proprietary hard coat, and which would make it not as soft as if it were pure acrylic, but it also has the advantage of not having static. And ultimately, however soft it is much softer than glass. So I think if the alternative is a glass package, you're infinitely safer. And as with almost all things in preservation, you're always weighing things and making the best worst guess you can. And here I say you have the advantage of a static dispersive surface with something that is relatively soft, although it's not as soft as pure acrylic. But it's certainly miles away from glass itself.
One thing to do that we took into account was the weight. The weight of this collection of papyrus was huge, and so the weight issue of storing between glass was reduced massively by the use of the acrylic, and the floor loadings would have been impossible. The fact that the floors got blown up afterwards, it was another thing. But so that was one factor in choosing to go for the acrylics. Now I know that there's a conservator in France has come up with using regular perspex for papyrus storage recently, a system, and maybe that's something else, because there the static is acting against each other, so suspending the papyrus. But I think the thinking was that static's maybe not a good thing if it's pulling off fragments of the papyrus onto the surface. So the lifespan of the coatings, I think, is probably very, very long and very tough, because I believe there'd be metal coatings, wouldn't there? Metal oxide type coatings. And I know from some glass coatings that if you put it through a furnace, that the coatings last, even though they've all crumpled up, much longer than the glass itself. You know, so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone at all? Yes.
Thanks. I was just fascinated about how does the anti-static work in an idiot's to a non-scientist? What's the magic? How does that work?
You're putting me on the spot.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
and in front of all of my colleagues. Okay, so to create different properties with both our glass and acrylics, so the anti-reflective, for example, and the anti-static, we apply these layers of metal oxides, as Stuart says. So there are several layers. One of these happens to be a tin oxide layer, and this is static dispersive. So instead of with normal acrylic, when you rub it to clean it, for example, static is created and it's attracted to the reverse. And with this material on, the opposite would happen. It is repelled.
Very clear. Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, I have two questions, one for Stuart and one for Hugh. I'm slightly surprised that you actually use a Tru Vue for the humidity, because my understanding was that acrylic glazing will fluctuate with environment. So we've done anoxic frame research, and we've actually written acrylic out, and we've used the glass glazing instead. So that's I'm interested whether there has been any development on acrylic that doesn't fluctuate with environment. And another one with the Hue is that you've used this material that is for balloon. I just wanted to know what kind of material it is made of, because if you're talking about hypoxia, it's going to have, VOCs if there's anything coming out of it. So it would be interesting to know.
Shall I answer that? Yes, for the acrylic, the was meant not for the anoxia, not for the no-ox frame. And so for the examples for the daguerreotype, they didn't want anoxia. What he wanted was something light but non-reflective and non-static. And for the enigma frame, then again, it's not meant to be oxygen-free.
But then you were worried about humidity, so you could actually have an impact on actually how tight it is for the humidity as well. So
yes, but the humidity is going to. I know that the humidity is going to go in and out through the acrylics really, really fast. Whether the Optium's got a better or slower moisture transmission rate than regular acrylic, I don't know. But from experience, you need glass to stop or metal to stop the moisture molecules traveling through because they're so small. And when I started with vacuum packing type of things, I sold some materials to the National Museum of Wales, and the scientists there did some experiments and found that the moisture molecules were going in and out of a package just, like as if it wasn't there, really. But the oxygen would stay out for 20 years. So the difference between an oxygen molecule and the moisture molecule was massive. And but in these two examples, it wasn't meant to be anoxic. Now with the frame, that I'm trying to achieve to make an anoxic frame, then we think we will need glass, unless we can come up with a solution of using acrylic on the outsides and glass on the insides, and then sealing it in using the same type of profile as we have there. But we don't know of an acrylic that will stop moisture. But it doesn't seem to do harm when the moisture, because I've packed wet newspapers for several years in a high oxygen barrier material that haven't gone moldy. The moisture's obviously been passing out over time, and it will eventually dry through the high oxygen barrier material. But mold doesn't seem to grow or with the movement of the moisture. So Hugh probably knows a lot more about that than I do. But these are empirical observations rather than as a scientist. But certainly by the experiments I've done with vacuum packing and other things, the issues of light fading, of colors fading, you can certainly stop a lot of fading. But then other things happen which I don't have the answers for. So basically, we're just trying to make a frame which works and can be used or not used.
Okay. This is high school chemistry, no physics. Okay, so I'm correctable by y'all, but I really appreciate observations like Stuart's about water versus oxygen. Because, of course, water is an oxygen with two hydrogens on one side, which gives it a small diameter as a molecule. It's also highly polar, which means it's going to be very pesky and invasive, whereas oxygen is two oxygens together, which makes it, as Stuart's observing, much easier to keep out, because it has a larger molecular diameter. So. As to the question of what is in the 2 mil reflective mylar, first we know that it's polyethylene terephthalate because they're calling it mylar. I don't have an MSDS on it, but virtually all these sealing foils have the same stratigraphy. It's an outer layer that is puncture resistant, which is the PET in this case, then polyethylene, PE, then aluminum, and then more polyethylene. So the interior, which your package will be exposed to, is polyethylene. So most polyethylenes seem to be relatively blameless. They're used widely in food packaging and conservation and in medical applications. Because it's an amorphous molecule and naturally soft, it does not generally get plasticizers. You can't say it's not the case, but they're not going to add what they don't need to add. So I say with some confidence, but of course I'm only advocating this for use around the art, not for use touching the art. It would be on the outside of the back of the MacMat package. So that's why I'm not more concerned about using a commercial product but people have been using Marvel Seal, which is just the same thing. It was made for the US military, and it has exactly the same components, but on the outside it's polyamide instead of polyethylene terephthalate. So, yes?
Good questions there. Anybody else?
So if you seal with a foil, the wider the seal that you get, the longer you're going to keep the oxygen and the moisture out. Because effectively, as you said, the inner layer is nearly always polyethylene, so that's the one that you heat. And if you can specify, and if you're dealing with specifications, then you want to ask for one without there was a plastic, polyethylenes that had butylated hydroxytoluene, and this stuff can let off gases. And they had it in some food clothes wrappers years ago, and it started yellowing and turning the clothes yellow. So you want a pure polyethylene, as pure as possible. So if you're specifying, you need to know as much about the materials that's getting used as possible. So the block, you're effectively creating a thick block of polyethylene at the edges. If you make a thin seal on a thin sealing machine, that's going to go through there quicker. It's just simple logic, really. But a lot of sealing machines that you get for sealing polyethylene are quite thin seals, and so they don't work as well as, so you need more seals, really. Escal has a glass layer coated onto it, and that will actually keep the moisture out as well as the oxygen. But you can keep things underwater because the water's not moisture. Yeah? And I've kept vacuum packages of things underwater, and it seems like a perfect storage environment for paper. Yeah. So.
Just to add, since Stuart's bringing in exotic materials, there is another, because he's absolutely right that the lateral movement of water and oxygen through the polyethylene or polythene would be slowed down if you made a wider seal. There's another material called RIBS MVTR, which is a basically corrosion intercept barrier material. So it has particulate expanded copper in the polythene layer on the inside, plus active carbon, and that could serve to intercept incoming oxidizing gases if you wanted to use it because generally I'm talking about something that's used for a framer or a small museum collection, but if you're getting really exotic, the RIBS material is one that's worth looking into, because it's got scavengers on the inside of the thing, so you don't need to worry about adding other things to scavenge within the package, because I always think it's useful, whenever you're sealing anything, to have some kind of a reservoir of scavenging material.
Okay, any more questions? And wave dramatically if so I'm not just missing you. Yes. Hi, can we pass along to Nancy?
Hello, just a very quick practical question for Hugh. I just wondered what type of hot melt adhesives you had used with your wonderful balloon wrapping, and I wondered what else is what is the adhesive that's in the hot gun? Thank you.
Beautiful question. The optimal adhesive would be 3M 3748, which is an electrical grade adhesive, which means it is inert to copper and silver. Therefore, it's past 2/3 of the Audi test. And it's among their jet melt or hot melt adhesives, it is probably the best at sticking to Mylar. So it's really good at making bonds. I'm guessing it would also stick well to polymethyl methacrylate and other similar polymers. And when I was discussing this with Stuart before, he said it may well be, a lot of these hot melts are actually EVAs more than PVAs, which that is always to the good. So, but the 3M 3748 is, I think, the best candidate.
Have you tried beaver film and things like that?
I have never worked with it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I've never worked with any of the Beaver products because they have proprietary ingredients.
Yeah.
Not to say that 3M doesn't too. Yeah. It's all based on trade secrets. But I just don't know what is in the Beaver.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't like what I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? Okay. Can we pass the microphone back?
Thank you. Have you already tested the adhesives in the various different frames?
I have not. Okay. The likelihood that these adhesives would oxidize is relatively low, because, the simple answer is no, I have not. But the 3748 is actually made for electrical applications, and that means it's non-corrosive to copper and silver. So I did not test it, but they did. More 2/3 of it anyway.
Okay, and just following on, has anybody done any pollution measurements within the sealed frames to see what levels of pollution is at?
Hand that one to me, do you? I don't know, to be honest. We haven't done it on these frames yet. It's something I'd like to do once we're further down the line on development. There may be examples where people have done it, and it's worth talking to maybe some of the scientists within the museum. So, say Caroline Butler might have done it in Wales. But if you want to give me your details and I find out, then
yeah, we've done various little bits, and just when you're getting very low air exchange rate, your potential for building up pollution is can build up very quickly to dangerous levels. So
yes,
even with charcoal cloth and as such.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful of the materials inside. We developed a charcoal paint, a new charcoal paint a few years ago, and I had a nicely polished silver spoon that was tarnished. I cleaned it and put it in a box of straw board. So it's a straw board box, but I painted a layer of paint on it, and that spoon is still perfect. So that paint is being very, very effective in mopping up. But I think active carbon, you need high quality carbons, and you need a lot of it really to do the job. That's my empirical experience on the situation. So with these sealed packages, I think it's a cocktail of using what available materials are there and trying to be sure that you've got excess capacity to mop up the things that are in there, and moisture as well. So the cellulose of the mount board. So in this particular Enigma frame, it would just be a pure cotton board. I know about the pigments and the tests that have been done on the different coloured boards that we've got. So I can see each one, if there's a difference between different colours of the mount board, how that's affected in terms of its metals contact, iron and things like that. So it's very important, if you're using boards, to know what's in the board, because it's not all, a cotton board isn't all cotton. It's a good amount of adhesive in there, and that's going to have things inside it. So from the supplier's point of view, we need to know everything that's in it. And so that's a big job to work out. So adhesives, I've been working on new adhesives for 4 years now to look for improved laminating adhesive. It's a lot of testing.
One last thing that I would add is I think it's always wise when you're sealing things up to put in a large quantity of sorbent materials, as Stuart was saying, and that could be microchamber material, which has zeolites that are organophilic and hydrophobic. It could be sacrificial metals like silver or copper, as in corrosion intercept, and it could be active carbon, and both the copper and the carbon are in the RIBS material. It has both. So, but it's always better to have more sorbent material in there than you can imagine needing.
Okay, any other questions? Yes. Now, can we get...
Hello. Yes, I just have a question again for Tru Vue. I was wondering if there's any decrease of the UV filtering strength of Tru Vue in the years. Is this something that it evolves or it stays the same?
As far as our artificial aging testing has gone, we also see no diminishing in the UV.
The levels of lux levels.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You mentioned about audit test, but have you done the aging test? How does that glue age, pH, and how does it?
The 3M glues. I don't think anyone has put it in an aging oven. So I can't. My answer is simply I don't know.
Okay, any other questions? If not, everybody is going to be here for a little while yet, and we have some more drinks and food, so please enjoy that and mingle, and feel free to ask questions if you need to.